Brother, are you all right?
No, I am not all right. I just shared a bottle of Kanar with Damar. That rhymes.
You're drunk.
Of course I'm drunk.
Sister,
Oh,
and ended up just blowing up the entire fucking apartment complex.
interesting. So I take it you sent someone incompetent to respond. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of that wonderful mess and potential, yes, there are spoilers ahead, people. Dune 2021 has been released globally now, and I've watched it twice. That is not an indication of my approval or disapproval of the movie at this point. Just understand, this is not a response after one cursory viewing. I was actually told by a few people, go ahead, be as nitpicky as you can about it. And now they are going to reap these benefits. But before we go on, bless the Maker and his water. Bless the coming and going of him. May his passage cleanse the world. May he keep the world for his people. Shai Hulud. Okay, I think we're ready to go now that we have the Maker's blessing. Where do we want to begin?
How about beat for beat? Where did it actually work? Where did it follow the Dune story?
Well, they had someone age appropriate cast in the role of Paul and Shawnee. And pretty much the rest of the roles, too. You know, when it comes to the casting, with the exception of a couple choices they made, I think they did good.
I'm not entirely sure about Jason Somoza, though.
That's one of the ones I think they could have done better.
Well, I'll ask you like I did before we started, Jared. Who would you put in his place?
No one that's alive is coming to mind right now.
Like, don't get me wrong, I agree. I don't think that's the right part for him. But I can't really think of anybody else currently that I would want to put in that place.
Well, I think part of it for me was actually less about how he played the character in his interactions with Paul, because the characters were very familiar. There's a reason why in God Emperor, Leto II has brought him back how many hundreds of times? There's a rapport there with the characters in the story that presentation, you get some of that banter. But if we were to have a Jason Momoa circa Stargate Atlantis and not Aquaman, I think there would have been an improvement there, because Duncan was not a jacked, massive man. He was actually of rather average height and build.
That being said, though, I can think of two actors I would rather see in that role, and who would be fitting the personality of Duncan Idaho more. Ryan Gosling or Hayden Christensen.
I could see Christensen from the appearance standpoint, but I'm not entirely sure about how well he'd be able to play off the character, given his history and how he has been given his personal opinion of the acting profession to begin with. I wonder how much of that would bleed through his performance. That's my hesitation for Christensen. But as for Gosling, that might work. Yes, we have Super Chat for 5 Aussie dollars from Davros. The spice flows thanks to House Atreides. The secret to the spice is in the ground. You know it. Oh, yes, I do.
No, because overall, I do not mind the actors, apart from Mimosa.
Yeah, you really have something against him.
Yeah, he comes across to me as the kind of character that no matter what he plays, he still plays the same fucking character. And no matter what role he has, no matter what the character is supposed to be, he shoehorns it in as something over the top trying to be tough, while sounding like a teenage boy or almost prepubescent teenage boy, trying not to have his voice break, so he talks as low as possible.
I think part of that is actually him trying to live up to a image he has in his head that is tied to his ancestry. But yeah, I agree there. His delivery and his physical presence of the character, to me, didn't work. It didn't quite jive. Do I think it killed the movie? No. If that was the only issue with the movie, would I massively hold it against it? No, I could actually... If that was the only issue with this movie, I would be more than happy. Well, that's a fucking no shit one, Jay.
I don't. I'm just scrumming through and getting their title for their list. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah, but these are fucking stupid.
Oh wait,
Actually,
it's only getting better though. And by better, I mean worse.
once you're done just typing
Jesus
them all out,
Christ.
we can go through them because it's...
Yeah, I'll get them done. You're gonna love this next one, by the way.
Oh, jeez. Oh, by the way, last minute thing that Jay is doing right now. Let me guess. It was one of the Trek Culture type channels.
Yeah, of the type watchmojo.com.
Ah, okay, yeah. So WatchMojo has done a recent video, 10 things you may not have known about the Dune universe, or Dune in general.
All right, Jared, here comes the number 3.
Oh, jeez. Duh? Holy shit. Okay, yeah, when we get to this list, fucking hell. This to me just goes to show how many people are talking about and writing about this movie, this franchise, this intellectual property that don't know a goddamn fucking thing about it to begin with.
Oh, God damn, this list is just.
Leon, did you see the message Dora just put into the live chat?
Last Guns?
Shall we do our deep dive on that to begin with?
How much time do we actually have?
We're still planning the 2-hour-ish runtime, give or take. So,
Yeah, we can probably put like 20 minutes on that.
Yeah.
Do you want to start or should I?
I will go ahead and start it. Yeah, Dora, that was something we noticed immediately. And actually, I even noticed that it was going to be an issue when they first arrived on Arrakis. Because the command was given to power on their shields before they were leaving the fair. The thing with Arrakis is personal shields are ineffective for 2 reasons. Where they do power on and work, they're massive fucking attractors for the sandworms. And the other places, they straight up don't work because of the electromagnetic interference from all the high static discharges that are happening in the atmosphere all the fucking time.
And the only real reason that I had one really proper working shield, as in the, not the shield wall, but the shield around Arcane, was because it was a giant fucking installation maintained all the time. Because it was highly vital, as can be seen later in the fucking movie.
So there's all 10 of them for you guys. Number
Good.
one's a great one.
Let's go over that after the shield and last guns, because this is going to take some time too. With the whole fucking thing, with the shields, they were using shields when they came to Arrakis. As I recall in the book, they were informed by Duncan, who had been there for a while by then, that shields were ineffective. Because either they didn't fucking work, just straight up didn't work because of all the static electricity, etc., or static charge, or they attracted the worm, which means that it couldn't really be used outside the walls anyway. So no one really used the shields. After that, you have the case of when the Sardaukar and Harkonnen were to attack, they used lasguns. That's a key point in the story, since someone, not going to say it was Duncan Idaho, was a clever little shit and had set up a shield that actually worked. And when the Sardaukar and Harkonnen actually came after them and started firing, that shield went off. Massive explosion. Big bada boom.
Think dual-ended nuclear blast. And with that, with the whole thing with Duncan's reporting when the rest of the house got to Arrakis, I will give him credit. They got the whole thing about Duncan going native pretty fucking accurate for that. It's one of the things they got right. But the way Duncan behaved in the meeting between Stilgar and Duke Leto. He was with the Duke. He was more formal. He wasn't as friendly with the Duke in official settings as he was in that one in this version of the movie.
That's actually something that goes into they did not quite understand the interaction between the different characters. They don't really understand what House Atreides is about. House Atreides is, 99% based on loyalty. That's why they have the most loyal people around. That's why they do things that make the subjects loyal to them. And that's why they fucked up so much of the movie when it came to, for example, the pacing and the telling of the stories.
And even issues with the set dressing. But we've kind of gotten away from the shields and lasgun issue because...
Oh, but that comes in with that too.
There were only a couple instances where a lasgun was actually used.
2. Out of those 2 instances, one of them was hunting fucking Duncan Idaho in a shielded ornithopter with a lasgun.
Yep. Which is completely idiotic in counter and would not have been done. And then the other time, a lot more accurately, is when the Sardaukar were trying to cut through the door to get to Paul and Jessica during that meeting with Kynes. That one made sense. The use of it there made more sense. But the fact that they weren't shown or used more properly or frequently, actually takes away from one of the reasons why the Fremen would do the types of attacks that were shown multiple times in the movie, where they would pop out of the sand amongst the enemy horde that they're going after. Part of it was for element of surprise, but another part of it, aside from the surprise, was to negate the long range effectiveness of a las gun. They wanted it to be an up close and personal fight from the beginning, so they could use their superior skills and actual bladed combat without having to worry about getting picked off from a distance where, sorry, a Mala pistol just doesn't have the range compared to a las gun.
It's almost as if it's just firing a small dart.
Couple of them, but yeah.
Also, that getting into the whole fucking thing with the shields. It's a neat concept to have US needle gun be able to pass through. Yep. It's a neat concept to have a US needle gun go through the shield by essentially being a type of a booster dart. But at the same time, it doesn't really work that way. It doesn't work at all that way.
No.
Well, I guess that's going to be a separate discussion just about the shields themselves and the thing, or the way that the shields work in this movie.
And how that's one of the things that the Lynch movie got right?
Yes, very much so. Actually, let's get into that before Jay comes back. And then we can do the list. Because the list is bugging me the fuck out now.
Well, and this begins my whole thought of, if we could meld the David Lynch movie and aspects of the David Lynch movie with aspects from this movie, the result could be perfect. To where it's an entertaining watch for people who are not familiar with the franchise, while also not slapping the people who are fans and are knowledgeable of the franchise in the face as they go.
Yeah, because, okay, for those of you who remember the original Lynch movie, they had the fighting scene between Gurney Halleck and Paul Atreides. It was mediocre when it came to the effects. But with the way that the shield works, it was fucking perfect. It showed off perfectly the way that the shields are supposed to work, the way that the shields are described in the book. They are essentially a force field around you that not just makes it so that things like blades don't really work, it also means that if you fall hard on the floor, that's going to make you slide over the floor since you have relative velocity to the floor. The shield will try to block it. And the new one, though,
it's like a hard stop.
Not just a hard stop. It's a hard stop, which then you can just force your way through. If you were to try that with the way that the shields are supposed to work, you just glance off again and again and again. You need to go in fast, or fast enough, in order for your opponent not to really notice it, and then slow down right before the shield in order to let your blade pass through. Something that's actually also vital to the end part of the book. Or rather, in part of
towards
the
the end of the movie, yeah.
And something that they kind of messed up. Yeah.
Like,
But,
there are parts to where, so Dora is said, the two movies are almost the same till first Storm Sign. There were differences prior to that point, but they were a bit more subtle. And the shield training fight between Gurney and Paul, the way Lynch set it up was more accurate to the book, where Paul wasn't training and practicing against a static dummy the way he was in this one. He was sitting on the wrong side of his desk, reading some of his academic material, when all three of them, Gurney, Yui, and Thufir, came in. It wasn't just Gurney who came into the room. And there was a classic and character-defining line from Gurney that wasn't in this movie. Mood?
Sadly.
Mood is for cattle and love play.
But it really shows off the character. It shows why this is something important. With this now in the movie, it felt more like... It felt way more choreographed. It felt like something that they did this kind of shit all the time. In both the first movie and in the book, this actually shocked Paul. He wasn't expecting it. He thought it was actually something where this isn't really that important. It can wait. I'm not in the mood right now. And Halleck essentially just assaults him. But he needed to do that. He needed to actually get Paul on his feet. He needed to get him on his toes just in order to make sure that he knew this was something serious. That's the entire point of that scene. You don't have the luxury of choosing when you're in the mood to fight. You don't have the luxury to choose when you're in the mood to do certain things. Sometimes you have to do them regardless.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that was actually presented quite well in both the miniseries and the David Lynch movie. When Gurney goes after Paul in that scene, Paul is taken aback and actually has a thought to himself is, what's gotten into him? This isn't normal. But instead, we get nothing. We get the actions, but this movie overall lacked a lot of the vision of why certain things were happening. One of the things that irks me, one of the things that to me set this movie up for essentially a failure from the eyes of being able to tell the story appropriately. We never see the Emperor. We never see the Emperor. We might have gotten a glimpse of what a navigator looks like, but we don't know. That opening scene in both the miniseries and the David Lynch movie, where the Guild dispatch a navigator to directly challenge and threaten without threatening the Emperor about how his schemes are going to cause issues with the flow of spice, and he better do shit right or the Guild ain't gonna be happy, and if the Guild's not happy, you ain't going anywhere. We get none of that. As a matter of fact, there was only one mention of the Spacing Guild in the entire movie. Every time they showed the year or referenced the year, which was only a couple times early in the movie, there was no AG at the end of the year. There was no reference to how they are keeping track of time, which is based off of the formation of the Spacing Guild. The only reference to the guild we get is when the emissary and that group from the Galactic Court show up to give the official documentation from the Emperor ordering the Atreides to take over the fiefdom of Arrakis. The emissary himself mentions it's him as representative of the Emperor, representatives of the Landsraad, a representative of the Bene Gesserit, and representatives of the Guild. That is the only mention of the Guild in the entire fucking movie.
They don't play any role in the movie. Hi, by the way.
Welcome,
Hello.
Terry.
But with that, that entire scene, the entire signing of the fucking contract, was filler. That scene paid no purpose. There was nothing there that was actually important to the story.
Yeah.
Well, had there been more actually presented of how the society interacts and everything, better yet, had they, prior to that emissary arriving, had they gone over the communication between House Atreides and House Harkonnen, which we get in both other instances, and how the Duke replied to the Baron, mentioning directly that the old art of Canly is known well from the Harkonnens. Without that background, the meeting with the emissary has no meaning. It has no weight. It is a purely empty formality that they put on screen. But in the actual story, in the actual book, there was weight to it. There was a reason to the formality, to the process. And there were... They kind of tried to start hinting at the questions of, why are we doing this? Why is this going on? And why did the Atreides accept the offer? Well, quite literally, it was accept or die. Knowing everything that was going to be coming, knowing what was going to be waiting for them on the planet, which they never showed those meetings where that shit was discussed either, there's a lot of setup that better be on the fucking cutting room floor, waiting for a director's edition to put it back in. Otherwise, holy shit, did this creative team drop the ball if it's not there.
To be honest, though, given the rest of the stuff that we see in the movie, I think that the director in charge of those parts didn't quite actually record more than just what we see here. Because as mentioned in private conversations, it feels like this movie is not just directed by 4 different people, but directed by different people in different scenes. Some scenes are nice. Other scenes are...
Passable?
Really, either passable or just a straight fucking fail. Duncan, Idaho, and shields. Why the fuck would you have a shield on an ornithopter on Arrakis that then gets chased by a fucking lasgun? It makes no sense. It's like trying to fucking get a mosquito off your forehead with a shotgun.
It works once.
Yeah. But just, it doesn't work at all. And with that too, the spies harvester scene. Because the harvester scene, it was a really jarring moment. It was something that showed that this person, at least, did not know at all what the fuck was going on in the book. Didn't even know what was going on in the original movie.
Hmm.
The way,
Oh, go ahead.
go on. No, but the way that they pulled it off, or the way that they tried to pull it off, they diffused all tension in that scene. Even in the Lynch movie, there was tension. And in the book, when you read it, there's tension. You do not actually know what's going to happen because they wait for the carryall. The carryall doesn't arrive, and that's a major plot point for later. You needed to have that scene executed properly in order for it to have any weight. As it is now, with just a meaningless trying to rescue Paul scene by Duncan, Idaho, that holds no weight. The way that they did things holds no weight.
They kind of gutted the whole traitor plot with Dr. Yui was diminished severely, and the hunter seeker scene as well. They basically took out all the hints that that led to there being a traitor in the Atreides ranks, and I think it hurts the story.
It does. There was no setup. It just happened. And even going further back, the whole thing of them missing the setup and missing the actual significance of doing the carryall scene during the inspection tour right. Let's go back even further to before they left Caladan. When Paul was taken to be questioned and interviewed by the Reverend Mother. There's a big bit of setup that was missed there. And the Lynch movie got it right. Jessica and the Reverend Mother were in Paul's doorway talking about him and other things, assuming Paul was still asleep. But he heard the majority of the conversation, which is where when he goes to finally go face to face with the Reverend Mother, Paul's concern is about his father. What about my father? What about the Duke? What did you mean nothing can be done? Nothing for him. That whole aspect of everything and that dynamic completely gone.
Yeah, there are so many things here, just going through them all, that you had so much more that needed a setup. You needed to know why Paul is at this point. You needed to know why it was that this was actually something important. You needed to know why the meeting with the Reverend Mother Gaius Helmheim was important. Without those things set up, there's just no weight to it. Sure, you don't know exactly who she is in the beginning of the movie otherwise, but it's something that gets explained later with Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, with Lady Jessica. And this movie doesn't explain shit.
Well, and that's the thing. You get reference to her being with the Emperor during the meeting with Peter de Vries and the Baron later. But again, by missing that opening scene in the other installations and the opening chapter of the fucking book, where the Navigator Eldrick goes to talk directly to the Padishah Emperor with the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Moheim on the other side of the wall, listening in as her duties as the Imperial Truthsayer. That sets up her character and introduces you to just how in the know in many areas of the Imperium she is. And we get none of that. We get none of the setup of just how intricate this web of political mess you are diving into actually spreads out. The only reference that it is ultimately political in nature that turns physically violent is that conversation between the Duke and Paul leaving the graveyard to go back to the palace on Caladan before they leave. And it was one line from the Duke. That was it.
Yeah.
Actually, do we want to go over the list so we then can go over one of the other glaring fucking issues with the movie?
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a moment to go over this list of things you may not have known about Dune.
Do you want me to screen share the still scenes where they posted the list, or just go off the list that I posted in the chat?
Oh, if you want to go ahead and do captures from the screen like that, go for it. Give it a little bit of additional flair and look. Move. We'll keep the spoiler warning visible. There we go. Trailer parallels. Is it because not everyone realizes that this is a remake of a movie that was initially released in 1984, which was a movie made in, well, which is from a book initially written and released in the 60s?
Actually, no. It's because they had 9 facts and needed one more to fill it out.
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, probably.
Well, just at least one of them had Picard in it.
And a proper Kynes.
Yeah, Max von Sydow was fucking great as Lead Kynes. And say what you want, Kyle MacLachlan was a good Paul Atreides, despite being slightly older.
He was. That, honestly, that is my only issue with McLaughlin's portrayal of Paul, was he looked older than he should have been.
Yeah.
The original protagonist.
Are they trying to allude that he's not this time?
I don't know. I didn't listen to it. I just went through and...
From what I heard, the Denis Villeneuve wanted to bring Paul more into the center because in the book the point of view shifts a couple of times, and he wants to use the second movie to develop other characters more. And I also heard that Chani might be the main character of the second movie. I don't know what to make of it. Sounds bullshit, but
It does, because Chani dies.
Yeah.
well, yeah, in the second book, I think.
Yeah, and granted, it is in the second book, but the book that they're pulling the material from, Chani is not a... Okay, if you want to look at the book as an ensemble cast where there is no true one main character, then yeah, you could go with that, and you could have chunks of time dedicated to following Chani. But in the books, outside of her, anything to do with her relationship with Paul, she's not there.
She's not important to the story.
Well, she's important to the overall story in that she's the romantic interest of Paul, which does ground him as a person, especially in book 2. and is the mother of
leads
the
to other
child.
problems.
Yeah.
And she is important to Paul, and she's important to Paul's relationship to the other Fremen, because she teaches him a lot and helps him integrate into the Fremen society. But yeah, I wouldn't say she is a main character in the book.
Overall, she isn't really that important. She's one of the characters supporting Paul, but she isn't a character that's strictly necessary for more than what she provides, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, that's where I would consider her character important in the role that she plays in Paul's visions, which does play a heavy motivator in waking him up and him accepting his destiny, at least initially. But aside from her being that sort of puzzle piece, it's just that. She's a piece of the puzzle. She is not the final image. If anyone can understand that parallel and analogy.
How about number 8 here?
This is not fucking Game of Thrones, people.
It's
Yeah,
what?
sandworms are important, and they are big, giant monsters, but they're not dragons. What does that even mean? Do they mean they are a mythical creature that are important to the lore and religious background of the Fremen? Then yes. But what does that have to do with dragons per se?
Oh, it's just that is. I think they are expecting, probably rightfully so, their target audience of this video to be rather ignorant of sci-fi history and everything, where this is one of the original sci-fi stories that really got the genre from a novelization standpoint to really gain traction. And there were a lot of elements that parallel the fantasy genre that are in those early instances of sci-fi. So that comparison of the sandworms to dragons, duh. I will say this, though. I prefer the 1984 depiction of the sandworm head over the butthole that we got now.
Maybe it's symbolic?
I kind of like the design of the new teeth, because the worms are supposed to be some kind of filter feeder.
And
but
that...
the rest of the design is not that great.
Give it the triple slit, but keep those teeth, because I do like the new version of the Chris knife.
Yeah, that is also, that looks good.
What?
Yes, no, maybe, who cares?
Yeah,
that's not really a Dune fact, though.
Yeah, that's a Ridley Scott fact.
That's the thing, is when they do these types of videos, they're just quite literally trying to come up with the most asinine things that the average person doesn't know.
Like Uber clickbait.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That people didn't know before, but people can get. People know Ridley Scott, and he's famous, so it's a fact that interests people, but yeah. Doesn't impact the movie at all.
And I mean, that's a nice tidbit related to it, but it's not about Dune. It's not really a Dune fact.
Yeah. Typically, when I think of facts about a franchise or intellectual property, give me something from the substance of the material.
Maybe work some of the book lore into what you're talking about and not just the movies.
Oh, like, pull out the fact that there are things called chair dogs in Dune. And we actually get a view of a precursor to it in the new movie, which I will give them that. And actually, okay. bit of a pause. So for those who didn't hear earlier or weren't aware, I went ahead and saw the movie this morning, of all times, in IMAX. So we watched it on the server in a group viewing on Wednesday evening, and then this morning I went and watched it in IMAX. When we get to the scene where it's the meeting on Gidi Prime between the Baron, the Reverend Mother, and Piter de Vries, the corrupted Mentat, there's the creature, the pet of Piter de Vries that's there. And Piter's tried to tell the Reverend Mother, no, it's not intelligent. It doesn't know our language. She uses the voice on it to get it to leave. And as it was leaving, I said out loud, fucking Lilaxu. And a couple people behind me started to chuckle. So I was like, okay, I'm not the only fan of the entire book series that's in here.
Yeah, but again, that is some weird cryptic fact of fan service that actually relates to people who know the book, but it's never explained and it doesn't have any real impact in the film.
It's good set dressing. I would say it's a good Easter egg-like addition to the movie that I don't have a problem with, because at this point, at this point in the books, we don't even really know about the Bene Lelax. So
it doesn't detract from the movie, that is true.
Right. It's a nice little thing in the of the actual environment that they're crafting that works in the setting that they're using. But speaking of the settings through the movie,
Number 5. The story combined several ideas.
I'm not entirely sure what they mean by this.
Yeah.
Hero's tale, Messiah tale, and political corruption and intrigue.
Yeah, it does. That is the whole point of the book.
Actually,
That is also the whole point, that Paul might be considered the protagonist, but he's not a hero
He's not a traditional hero.
Jay, see if you can pull up the transcript.
3 dots.
No, it's in the 3
Yeah,
dots.
no, it's the 3 dots. I was hitting the wrong thing.
And just play 1 second or something like that so it can catch up. There you go.
So Jared is right. The Messiah complex and everything. Or the Messiah arc.
Yeah.
Millie, go lay down. Come on.
So in other words, it's essentially the first thing really that is related to Dune.
And we're halfway into the video.
All right. The first one, Jared said 2.
Yeah.
We already kind of knew that, but that's about Star Wars. It's not about Dune.
I know.
Yeah, that was the one that I saw pop up and go, well, no shit.
Yeah. It's just.
And actually, looking at that, the ornithopters in the new movie look a lot better. But then again, technology has advanced.
Yes, and this is where I think the visuals of the new ornithopters are better, but I still see them as too much. Oh god, that fucking hat. The way I always visualized the craft in my head from reading the books was that there was a little more girth to the actual body of the craft while utilizing maybe more bee-like wings, or halfway between bees and mosquitoes, not the full-on mosquito dragonfly appearance that we got in the new one. But because still very bug-like, just not exactly how I envisioned the craft.
Though I think what or regarding the vehicle designs, the ornithopters are okay. They look good. The spice harvester looks great, even though it's barely visible in the scene. But the carryall looks atrocious. It's minuscule compared to the harvester, and it doesn't compare anything to the description in the book, that it's a massive machine that is ginormous. And in the movie scene, it's barely visible because it's so small compared to the harvester.
Yeah, and the carryall is supposed to be able to actually support, what was it, 2 or 3 operating harvesters? Not one.
I'm not sure if that was something that was supposed to be concurrently, or if it was something that was supposed to be that they can actually carry 3 of them at the same time.
You know, they were just doing it for the dramatic effect of the scene. Come on now.
Yeah, but this scene wasn't dramatic because of the way how they did it.
Yeah.
It could have been missing, as it was in the book, as it was in the first movie, and it would have been better because it makes fucking sense.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the taking out the whole traitor plot. They changed it from the carryall not showing up, which is clear sabotage, to it's a technical failure with the grappling system, which could be sabotage, but it could also be just bad maintenance. But yeah, again, by taking out the whole setup, they devalue the scene with Dr. Yui later in the film.
Yeah.
They do it even more by then saying, oh, look, everything's falling apart. And then blaming the whole or blaming the issues there on everything's just falling apart.
Yeah, I think the Duke tries to blame it on the Harkonnen, but Liet Kynes basically in this scene says, yeah, that's just bad maintenance. You can't blame the Harkonnen. Later in the film, she actually says that she was ordered not to see any sabotage because, of course, the Emperor wants the Atreides to fail. But in this scene, it's left hanging.
Yeah. Well, and again, we get a lot of we get proper setup in the David Lynch movie that we didn't get here. You have a couple instances of Thufir and his reactions to his security measures and his work not catching everything. Quintessential actually is in the Lynch one when they first get there and Thufir is starting his sweeps. He even says, we're finding these sabotages too damn easy. You get that sense of something's not right here from the beginning. Where was that in this one? Where was the setup for these threats and these issues? We get a lot of result, but we don't get the setup for them to actually mean anything or for them to actually carry any importance or weight. I really think that is the critical failing of this version of the movie so far, is that for everything that they needed to set up, they didn't. And everything they didn't need to set up, they did. They got a lot of it backwards.
Yeah. Do we want to go to number 2 then?
Let's see, number 2.
Are you sure about this?
Can it get any worse?
Yes.
They're really unanswered though. Because the answer is there if you keep reading.
You assume that these people understand that the movies are based on a book that they haven't read. Or if they did read, it was so long ago they've forgotten everything.
Or they were disinterested in it and put it down and didn't actually finish reading it. Although there are... Once Frank knew that this was going to be a longer running book series, there were setups in one book that didn't pay off until the next. There were things that were hinted at and mentioned that didn't actually come to fruition or make entire sense until the next book or even 2 books later. Like, Paul's vision in the tent with Jessica and what scares him. It isn't just the jihad in his name, which he doesn't realize it's his name per se. It's in the name of Muad'Dib. That frightens him because of the path of destruction that it's going to leave across the entire known universe. But that wasn't the core fear of his. In that vision, he also started to see what is called the Golden Path. And he did not like what that required. That's what really frightened Paul, was the path that he needed, or he was being shown that humanity needs to go down to survive. Spoiler warning for those who haven't gotten this far in reading the series, Paul is not the one that actually puts humanity down the Golden Path. It's his son, the God Emperor, Duke Leto II.
Yeah.
He's the one who actually pushes humanity down the path that it actually needs to go of the Golden Path. He's the one that actually had the balls to do it. And even part of him felt sorry for his father for not having it, but also hated him for it because it pushed the responsibility onto him, onto Leto.
I don't get this one unless they've just watched the new movie.
I will give the Lynch version this. They really did make it sudden with the rain on Arrakis.
That made no fucking sense, but that's the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was one of the things that the Lynch movie didn't do too well, in my opinion, with the rain at the end. But it doesn't even really fit here, because the end of the new movie isn't the end of the story. It's just to be continued in the next part. It's only the end of part 1 in the book.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I will give the new movie credit for. The way the movie ended and that line from Johnny, it works. Knowing that it's part 1 of at least a 2-part installation, knowing that Paul is only just beginning to truly follow his path, finally. That line from Johnny works. Ending the movie, that short bit after she says that to them, works. But I do have a problem with that scene.
One?
I'm putting it as one scene. I'm talking about the extreme end, of the very end, not what happened immediately before they started the walk. The scene of that walk leading up to Johnny turning back to Paul and saying that, and then going from there to roll credits. My problem with that scene, why the fuck were so many of them walking with neither the nostril connection in or their mask?
They were so tired at the end of the movie, they just wanted to die.
Yeah, that was another thing that I noticed a lot in the new movie, was that a lot of the Fremen in the background, or even the main characters in certain scenes, sometimes they had the nose plug in, sometimes they didn't, and it didn't really make any sense. And it also seemed like really cheap continuity errors.
Actually, I remember you mentioning that when we were watching it in the text and the talk initially after. I think a handful of the times where it flips back and forth like that is actually playing off of Paul's beginning of the visions just from being on Arrakis and around the spice as much as he was, where those flashes of him with Chani where they both have the nasal cannula, then the nose plugs in, are the vision, and him without the nose plugs in, that is him actually in the moment in reality. And it keeps bopping back and forth because he's not getting a clear, concise image in his mind, in his presence. He's actually bouncing between. He's in that fog between primary sight and his second sight. But there are other times that, yeah.
That is the problem. If it had been consistent in the whole rest of the movie, then that would have stood out and would have been an interesting take to say, yeah, that is the difference between the Paul that is new to the desert and the Paul that is already living in the desert and is from his own vision of the future or something. But then it shows up in scenes where it doesn't make any sense, and that devalues again the original scene where it could have been interpreted in an interesting way.
And to add to that, these are Fremen. They keep the nose plugs in. They actually have nose plugs, not just some fucking spray painted black
Nasal cannula, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that is probably concession to the movie, because if you have actors with a nose plug in, they can't act. But yeah.
No, but when they have them hanging loose, you could at least have the fucking plugs on them. Just buy a cheap pack of those whatchamacallit. There's ear tips for different earbuds and shit like that, and just stick them on there.
Yeah.
It would have cost a few dollars. And that's actually something that's part of the movie too, because these nose plugs are worn out, or these nose plugs are too loose. Get him some new ones.
Yeah. But that comes back to, a lot of the time it feels like a cheap continuity error that the costume department or whoever just didn't care. And if they actually had put a little bit more effort in, it would have been better.
Now, this is where I'll look directly at the entire creative staff and the production staff, because take a guess who was listed as part of the executive and producing credits, as well as being a consultant. Brian Herbert, his sister, Kevin J. Anderson, who helped Brian Herbert write all the latest iterations of Dune that finished the original story arc and went back to the histories and fill in the gaps between the original books. And David Lynch himself was a consultant on the film.
How much were they actually consulted, though?
That's the question. That's what we don't know, is how much they actually voiced their opinions and understanding and view of things, and how much they were listened or ignored. We don't know, and we may never know.
Yeah.
But you had those resources there. They were there enough for you to put them in the fucking credits. Should probably listen to them because of how much they've been part of and around the property for their professional lives.
And with that, I think that they would have had something to say about the lack of people.
Yes.
And the lack of understanding in regards to what the people actually mean there. If you watch the movie is fucking barren. There's barely any fucking people anywhere that aren't either part of the entourage, as in the traitors entourage, they directly, they're, what's it called? They're direct followers, military officers, servants, shit like that. Harkonnen, Sarkar, officials, there's no civvies. There's no fucking civilians.
Yet the closest they get to actually showing civilians were on the other side of a gate, and they were just referenced as Fremen pilgrims.
And even then, they didn't get that fucking scene right at all. The pilgrims should have been in the courtyard. There should have been hundreds of them in the courtyard. They should have looked up at those palms, either with hope, disgust, or any range of other feelings. Because those palm trees, they don't represent hope. Fuck you.
Yeah.
I fucking hated that with the movie. Those palm trees are there to show you, fuck you. We have palm trees here. They cost enough water per day to feed 100 people or to help 100 people, to keep 100 people alive. We have these palm trees here as a big fucking middle finger, or even 20 middle fingers, just to show the population of Arakeen, we have power, we have water, you don't. You can go fuck yourselves if you think that you're going to get anywhere close to this. And there were people, as is explained in the book, looking up at the palm trees. Some hoping that dates would drop. Some looking at them and realizing that there's a lot of water actually used for these palm trees. Water that could actually be used, to not let 100 people die. Even after that, the banquet scene in the book, where one of the things being done is that they let people who wanted come there and take one glass of water each. It cements just how much the Atreides actually care for the people and how much they care to actually make their own reputation, at least somewhat better than the Harkonnens.
Yeah.
All of those things are lost.
And the banquet scene also set up something. It was a setup for later in the book and also into book 2, Dune Messiah. The eldest daughter of the Emperor is at the banquet, and she and Paul are essentially maneuvered towards each other because there's that political aspiration side. One of the prefaces to one of the chapters, I forget which one it was, but it made it into the mini series where the Lady Jessica says to Chani, while right now we are nothing more than consorts, history will remember us as wives.
Yes, fuck Irulan.
Yeah.
Well, not literally, but yeah.
But yeah, we don't.
Yeah.
We don't get that introduction. We don't get that opening of the door to Paul's actual power play to get the throne. Isn't to cut a deal with the Emperor, as he tries to state in the movie. He ends up realizing, no, there's going to be a military victory, but rather than killing the Emperor, he doesn't have any male heirs. I'm going to marry his eldest daughter. That will give me claim to the throne, and I will exile him to Seleucus Secundus.
And that will effectively cut off any chance of rebellion or supporters of the emperor objecting or something off at the knees, because now he's not the conqueror who defeated the emperor, but he is the rightful heir, and that is an important difference.
Yeah, it is very feudal in the way that the universe is constructed politically, but there are certain ways that has to be handled in order to do it right. And that is the thing about the entire franchise. Yes, there is something larger than politics at play through the entire story of all of the books. Yes, I understand that. However, it is a very political game that is played between the players all along the path. And we're not getting the setups. We're not getting the actual treatment and handling of the nuance of those storylines that needs to be there for these things to actually play out and pay off in a way that they should. And you're going to have a lot of things happen in movie 2 that a lot of people are going to be confused by because they don't know what the fuck is going on leading up to it.
Yeah, or they won't happen in the second part, which would be even worse.
Well, no, some of them have to happen, though. Like, some of the things that are coming up in movie 2 that are crucial points of the story. Paul taking the water of life. Jessica taking the water of life to be the new Sayadina for Siege Tabur.
Yeah.
Which then we'll get into that in a moment.
Yes.
You have the raids that Paul you have Paul getting his Fedaykin, his personal guard, and the raids that they go on, where they run into Gurney Halleck and essentially kidnap him and bring him back and bring him into the fold. Then you have that final confrontation, the final military confrontation between the Fremen and resurgence and reestablishment of House Atreides that requires the Emperor to physically be present. They have to set everything up for the actual storyline to play out the way that it is supposed to. Paul becomes such a thorn in the side of the Harkonnens, and Spice production is impacted so much that the Emperor himself leaves Khitan to directly deal with the shit.
And there we come back to the Spacing Guild, because the Spacing Guild isn't properly set up. So if in the second movie suddenly a navigator shows up and pressures the Emperor, that doesn't make any sense.
So many things in this movie that don't make any fucking sense. Mainly because, as I've said before, this movie feels like someone made a script based on the description of the first Lynch movie, as told by someone who's drunk and watched it 20 years ago. It feels like they haven't actually read the source material. It feels like they don't actually understand why it is that Dune works, what is actually happening in Dune. It's like the videos we've been watching at times with the African helicopters.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is.
It really is, because yeah, it looks like a helicopter, but when you actually take a little bit, just a little bit of a closer look, you realize it's not going to work. It's not even close to anything that would actually work. Do you have any clue how any of this actually comes together to do what you want? Well, but it looked like this. Oh god, especially that one that took the fucking passenger compartment and front end from a car, put it on skids, and then had the fucking, oh god, the rotors were nowhere near long enough.
Yep.
Yeah.
You mean the rotors have to have a certain size to be able to lift properly?
Oh, not just that. Not just that. The main rotor blades, flat pieces of steel. No pitch, no airfoil shape, just a flat, long strip of metal that was still half the length it would need to be if it was actually a lifting airfoil.
And that perfectly describes this movie. At a cursory glance, it has all the elements of the book, of the Lynch movie. But then when you actually start looking at those details, it's not just that you have the fighting scene with Gurney Halleck. You can't just have a fighting scene and then hope it works. The fighting scene needs to actually have some kind of impact. The fighting scene needs to show that this is something where Paul is actually shocked. He's taken aback by it. He really thinks that he's going to fucking die. And he has to fight for his life.
Oh,
It's not just a fucking play fight between between two friends. That's not how it works.
well, and the fight with Jameis.
Oh, yeah, that shit.
There was so much wrong with that. There was so much that was missed and completely ignored. That is crucial to what actually gave that weight. I will give the writers this one shred of credit. Stilgar asking Jessica, what is this? Is he toying with him? You got that in there. But there's no explanation of why Stilgar would ask that question. There's no setup around what is actually making this personal combat between Jameis and Paul such a hanging important moment and defining moment in Paul's life, other than those flashes of the voice from a vision he said saying, Paul has to die for the Kwisatz Haderach to arise. And then it turning into, when you kill someone, you kill a part of yourself. Like, I think that they recognized, oh shit, we fucked up in setting this up. How can we fix it?
Yeah, and while I am happy that they didn't strip down to their underwear, I do not like the setup of it.
It was the wrong setup. Jameis did not challenge Jessica. He challenged Paul because Paul got the better of him. And, I was surprised. I demand my honor back. I demand a second chance at him. Jameis challenged Paul directly. It was not Paul standing up for his mother in that scene in the book.
More drama this way.
The emotions between them, the emotions that Paul showed earlier in the fucking tent, are pretty much the ones that he should have been showing here, and vice versa. In the tent, Paul was more somber. He was realizing that, oh, shit, there's more to our family's bloodline than what I've been told before. he should have recognized Lady Jessica as being Harkonnen because of all the fucking spies around him.
Yeah, and that was the thing. It wasn't just defeating Jameis in one-on-one combat that pushed Stilgar to say that Paul is now part of our siege. Paul is accepted. No. What really caught them, what really grabbed the attention of the Fremen that were there that witnessed this fight, was after they had heard the explanation from Jessica. Two things. Paul is only ever trained to fight against someone else wearing a personal shield while he's wearing one, so this is his first time fighting without a shield, and he's never killed anyone before. This will be his first blood if he wins. This is entirely uncharted character for him. Uncharted territory for him as a character. And at the end of that, at the end of him beating Jameis, he cries. He gives up his moisture for the dead, which is one of the signs that the Fremen have for the Isan al-Gaib.
Yeah.
And they fucked it up.
And in, before that, the initial setup to all that, after the challenge was given and accepted, Paul's over there collecting his thoughts, wondering, oh shit, what the fuck am I doing? I'm having replays of the vision again where I get killed by this motherfucker. And then Shani comes up, offers her ancestral Chris knife, and then leaves it at that. Where the fuck is the warning that Chani actually gave in the book in the other instances of this, where, yes, Jameis is a great fighter, but he has this tell and this tell? Chani gave Paul advice that fucking saved his life. Where was that in this movie?
Yeah. They even turned that whole relationship around in the new movie by her basically saying, yeah, you can have my knife, so you can at least die holding a good knife, because you won't win this. And that is a whole completely feeling to the scene than it's supposed to be.
Yeah, just like the fucking Spice Harvester scene. It doesn't actually work. It doesn't work because they don't actually understand the source material. They don't understand the parts going into it that makes it actually work. You've put the rotors on, but the rotors are from a fucking toy airplane. It won't fly. And I really fucking hope that there's a longer cut of this. I hope they're going to release a proper long cut, a la the Snyder cut. 4 hours actually fleshing it out, having it edited in such a way that it actually makes fucking sense, and not just more of, well, what we have here now. This is.
There definitely has been talk about scenes that were filmed but are not in the movie, like, for example, the Gurney Halleck Ballestad scene, which I'm not too sad about that it's not in the movie. It's a good scene and it gives Gurney Halleck a lot more character, but it's not essentially important. But yeah, a lot of people have been talking about it, and it was confirmed that it was filmed, so probably there are other scenes as well. It might find its way into the second movie as a flashback or into a director's cut or something. But that still doesn't solve the problem that there are a couple of scenes in a 2.5 hour movie that stretch maybe half an hour, maybe 45 minutes, that are not really necessary. So they didn't understand why some scenes matter and some scenes don't.
I have to agree with Dora there.
Yeah, that. Yeah, some things that hit the cutting room floor are better left there.
Yeah.
No, but we have some things are critical to the fucking story. They could have spent half a minute just showing who you is, showing why you is there, how come he's actually the physician, what his role is. All of those fucking things. Just spend a couple of seconds trying to actually add that shit in.
Or how about this? Have him be an actual physician and not a fucking mystic.
Yeah, that would work.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then again, considering the rest of the stuff, I am not sure if this movie was made on the cheap or if it's just something where the way that they planned it just ended up like this.
I think it was poor planning because it was not a cheap movie to make, even with the physical sets and everything that they did. Because when you look at the sets themselves, that was not done cheaply. Look at a lot of the mix of the practical and visual effects. That was not cheap either. I think they had the budget to do things properly. They just spent it in the wrong spots at times.
At times.
I think that is one of the things I've heard a lot of people say that I wholeheartedly agree with is the movie looks epic. But sadly epic in some of the wrong places, and yeah, they spend the money on some things where they maybe shouldn't have, and they didn't spend enough money or time, or didn't care about other things where they should have paid more attention.
Yeah, like I get it. They needed to give the proper service to the Dune franchise. It is an epic story. It is a very, very large, very intricate, very heavy project to address. So I like a lot of the direction they went with the buildings, but they were too empty. That especially around the Atreides, it was too empty. Yes, these places were large. The main entry hall, the main banquet hall, a lot of the rooms in the Palace of Arrakeen were huge spaces. But they were that size for a reason. And that reason is because of what they would host in those rooms. About the only room that they got the size right and the population for the scene was the briefing room.
That's the only one. Okay. Just going over some quick points with this before going into something that actually made it right. The way that they show this, the entire place is fucking empty. It's barren. There's fuck all people there. There's a lot of huge areas, really nice, grandiose areas. But they're grandiose in the same way that you'd actually see it in, say, some old game, where there's nothing to them. They're flat, maybe not in their actual construction, but in the way that there's nothing happening. It's just a box. It's there just to be seen and nothing else. That could be taken in many different ways. But the way they've done there, it's very, it's sterile. It adds nothing.
Which, in some areas, that is entirely perfect for it to be like that. Like when they're out in the desert, especially the deep desert, getting those views of just vast nothingness aside from sand. Aside from the dunes everywhere with the occasional outcroppings of rocks. That fits and makes sense on that area of location that they're in. The abandoned Imperial ecology station. Did it need to have that big vacuous thing in the middle? Probably not, but depending on what actual experimentation they were doing, it still made sense if it was a glorified wind trap, which would make sense with one of the rooms we see later. Again, I don't expect that sort of nuance and detail and explanation to happen in a movie like this, but you have little things like that that can be accepted. But to have that massive palace on Caladan, and every time they reference Caladan and later Dan in the series, and House Atreides is there on their homeworld, they are of the people. They are for the people. They are not disassociated or disconnected from their people. But we saw none of them. And then we get a quick pan of some pilgrims in Arrakeen, but nothing else. There's such a richness and a fullness to the world and the universe that was created by Frank Herbert that was completely fucking ignored in this movie. And I think that's what pisses me off the most, and why I can't fully endorse and accept this movie, because there are fundamental issues like that. You took a fully fleshed out form and you whittled it down to only a partial skeleton, and then put that skeleton together wrong. Am I going to watch part 2? Yes. Am I going to be as optimistic with part 2 that I was with part 1 prior to seeing it? No.
And the sad thing is that part 2 might be trying the same thing again. Grandiose, but no reason for it being grandiose. As well as either it's so fucking dark that you can't see shit, or in the next scene, scorching your fucking corneas out.
And yes, it was just as bad, if not worse, in IMAX. That there were parts where the disparity between the light and shadow made sense, like when you're inside under shade looking out into the Arrakeen open air. But there were times when, oh god, one of his vision scenes, it was the beginning of his vision scene in the tent, where we're bouncing from in the tent to him apparently walking behind Shani in the desert at sunset. You're going from in the tent to blinding sunset, to in the tent to blinding sunset, to in the tent to blinding sunset. If you are bothered by visual stimuli, be careful watching this movie.
That being said, though, and with all the scenes and what didn't work, we really need to bring up something that did work. The Foundation so far.
Yes.
The Foundation did everything that Dune fucked up right.
Yeah. Even coming back to just the people. In the Foundation series, when we are on Trantor, there are people everywhere. Even some of the scenes where we are in the Imperial Palace and the young Emperor goes out to the gardens, and you see just 20 gardeners in the background. That is what the Dune movie missed.
Because
That you have just
people.
the scene in the palace, and you see people around like you would in a normal palace. There are people working there, there are people living there, there are bureaucrats, there are servants.
And not just that, something that Foundation so far, at least the first 5 episodes, I kind of have to have that caveat because we haven't watched all of it yet. They have done everything that needs to be grandiose, proper grandiose.
Yeah.
But if it hasn't needed to be grandiose, they don't do it. It's a fucking scene in a laundry. They make it to be like a laundry. It isn't something where everything is big and grandiose and gilded and all that shit. It is a laundry. It's nothing more, nothing less. They have managed to do with the Foundation, even with news stories, the shit that isn't really in the books, they managed to follow the tradition of the Foundation. They've managed to follow what the Foundation is about. They've nailed the Foundation when it comes to how it works. And it's so sad that I had more hopes for Dune than I had for the Foundation when, when I knew that both were going to come out. And now, I fucking love the Foundation the way that it's been set up so far. I think that Dune fucking sucked.
Yeah, that is another thing that the Foundation really did right, is they didn't cling to the source material. There's new stories, other character development. They left some parts out, but they kept the important core of the story. What is the message? What is important? And that is something that the new Dune movie, in my opinion, didn't do. And that's where it fails.
Yeah.
I wanted to like this. I wanted to rave and be surprised by this proper handling of Dune. And we didn't get it. It's a visually nicer version of the Lynch movie, but in story detail reverse. I've said this multiple times, and I've said this to a number of people when asked about it. What the Lynch movie got right, this movie got wrong. What this movie got right or got passable, the Lynch movie got wrong. So, meld the two. Give us the proper storytelling of the Lynch movie, which the Lynch movie deviated from the source material, and I accepted that and understood it. I expected this one to deviate some from the source material, similar to the Foundation. But don't leave critical points out. Like, one of the critical points, one of the things that was a staple, one of the things that actually fed directly into character development and why Chani and Paul end up gravitating towards each other is gone from this. And that's the fact that in every other version of it, every other version of Dune, Chani is the daughter of Liet Kynes. Not in this. So the fact that they still had Kynes die in a different way, but they still had Kynes die in this movie, it doesn't have the same impact that it did in the other instances in the 1984 movie or in the miniseries. Chani goes into grief because she loses her father at the hands of the Harkonnens. Paul lost his father at the hands of the Harkonnens. That is one of the initial things that brings them together, that allows that relationship, that allows that connection between them to begin. Other than Paul's visions, what do we have now?
A 2.5 hour drag.
Yeah. The thing is, they could still put the connection in. They kind of played a little bit with it that Paul says that he knows that Liet Kynes was married to a Fremen warrior that fell in combat, but they don't make it explicit. So as Jared said, it's all the connection that should be there is lost at the moment. Even if they put it back later, it doesn't change what we have now.
You know what really concerns me though with this? I worry that with this, we'll have a generation of people who've never fucking read the book, who've never watched the Lynch movie, who've never even heard about the miniseries, who will think that this is Dune, that this is actually what Dune is all about. And they will all be all the poorer for it.
Yeah, I really hope that that generation ultimately, even if it's through audiobook, listen or read the source material, and you will be amazed at the depth and nuance of the story that's there. And who knows, you might just get a little angry that that wasn't the quality of storytelling that you were given initially. I know I seem to say it every time we start talking about these latest media offerings, but this is one talking point that is a core thing for me on evaluating entertainment media, and it's one of the things that the Foundation series is getting right. They are telling a damn good story.
Yeah, we're going to have to go over that once we're actually finished in, what was it, 5 more weeks?
Yeah, I think the 6th episode was this Friday, and it's 10 in total.
That's going to be good, though. It'll be good.
But yeah, I've said this before, I think. I can't be sure because now in my position, I know a lot about Dune. So a lot of these discrepancies and problems jump out at me and discourage me and make me angry. But when I watched the David Lynch version, it intrigued me. It was mysterious. Yes, I didn't understand a lot of what happened because a lot of the background is still missing in the David Lynch movie, and there is some weird shit in it that doesn't make any sense. But I was intrigued. I was mystified. I wanted to read the books to find out what this was all about, what was behind it, to find out more about the story, about the world. And I don't see that, at least not as strong with this movie. Maybe someone who really doesn't know nothing will watch this and say, oh, that sounds interesting, I want to read it. But I fear that they will just watch it, say, yeah, it was an okay sci-fi movie. It was no Star Wars, but it's not bad. And then just leave it at that. And that would be a shame, yeah.
Also, we have to acknowledge at least one last thing. I don't know how much more time we have. That made the Lynch movie so much better than this movie. Toto.
You know what? When it comes to the Foley and the music of this one, I wasn't disappointed, but there was... The music stylings of Toto worked with the visual aesthetic of the David Lynch movie. The combination worked. I will give it that. That marriage right there.
The Hans Zimmer score was really good.
Yes.
And I really liked it. But yeah, I think the new movie missed at least something that had a melody. It was just it was a really good modern movie score, but it didn't have anything that actually had a song quality to it. And yeah, that is what Toto did with the original movie. There are some callbacks to that in the score, but I was missing something that really had a little bit of structure, a melody to it.
Yeah, a lot of the tension that they were presenting, this is what really struck me. A lot of the tension that they were put at certain scenes in this movie were entirely from the score. They entirely put it on Hans Zimmer. And yeah, I agree with Dora, there were some hints here and there to the original score with Toto and a little bit there. Congratulations and good job, Hans, on that. But for as epic and broad the visuals were, the musical score did have some instances of lacking, and I tie that to just not having the story material there for Hans to go off of to really show what he can do. It was good from him, but it wasn't his best. I would say that there was one clear theme there, Dora, and I wonder how much this would unsettle some of the more sensitive potential viewer base. The Fremen are very close to Sunni Islam, so you get a lot of that deep Mediterranean Arabic Islamic influence that carries through a lot of the musical score, especially when they mention Arrakis and once they are there.
That being said, though, I don't actually get the vibes of that when you read the book. Mostly because of the way that shit has evolved after that. Sure, some things like, say, the tonality of it, maybe, but not the entire we go at it from the way that we look at shit today vibe. And that's kind of something like when you look at that Atreides arriving on Arrakis, there's bagpipes. And I can, to some degree, understand that. But at the same time, there's bagpipes. Why don't they include the balisette? I'd say the balisette is a more important part to it because it describes Gurney Halleck.
Yeah,
And the arrival there with bagpipes.
Well, it's one of those, since they didn't have the balisette scene with Gurney earlier on as a founding scene of the relationship between Paul and his teachers, then that would have been a good spot to have it in as part of that arrival ceremony on the planet. But it's a missed opportunity.
It is, and I feel it makes the story worse for it. Simply for the reason that it doesn't really work out. It takes away some elements and tries to force other elements in.
Yeah, it's like I would say 85% of the decisions they made about story elements of what to keep and what to get rid of, they should have gone the other way. Dora, now you're starting to realize why I like Frank Herbert's books. He gave no fucks. He got an idea in his head and he ran with it.
But something we have to actually remember too. Frank Herbert was deeply rooted in ecology, fuck's sake,
Yeah.
and shit like that too. He was more actually interested in how do people work than what would the perception of people be to make this work. He didn't. No, he didn't care about the way that people got upset over it, or people could be upset over it, because in the end, they actually show off human nature. They don't show off this ideological, polished outlook of the fucking human species and etc. etc. It shows what people actually are. It shows exactly how the fuck people act. And I think that's what makes him so good. It's not something that's too polished for it.
I think that that is another missed opportunity, that they more or less cut out all of the mentored stuff, because that is also a very important element to the world of Dune, that there are no computers, but that all of this falls onto humans, and this brings this element of human nature into what we in our modern world see as a little bit sterile environment, because computers are not humans.
Yeah, and that was one thing that the Lynch movie, for all its faults, got right. Is they said in that prologue, in that beginning to the extended cut of it, you get ample explanation of the universe you are stepping into and why things are going to look foreign, why some things are going to look backwards. You're getting a preface that this is not your normal rodeo you're about to embark on.
And that just reminds me of that fucking video you shared there, Jay. If you're still here or if you're back from your
Yeah, I'm back.
walking. With the fucking video you shared and the reasons they gave. And it almost gave me a fucking aneurysm.
Have you gone back to finish watching it?
No, I only made it 10 minutes in, and it's so fucking stupid. It's someone who doesn't even, well, has barely fucking heard of Dune, trying to explain shit in Dune. One of the things related to this is that they're saying that, oh yeah, but there's no computers because they didn't want more computers because people grew lazy and didn't want to better themselves. No, they don't have intelligent machines. They don't have artificial intelligence because it tried to fucking kill them. Because they don't want another fucking Butlerian jihad. They don't want another fucking robot uprising. It's like saying, oh yeah, but you don't like peanuts, that's why you don't want to eat them. To someone who's allergic to peanuts. Sure, you can eat them. You're going to die if you do. But, it's just because you don't like them.
I think the main problem with that video is that they're trying to look at it purely from a economic point of view and not what the story actually is. And that's the problem. They're trying to pass off their economic philosophy onto modern media.
Yeah, they're fucking stupid.
I'm not arguing with you on that one.
If everyone's dead, there's not going to be an economy. The whole thing that it's not even something taken from an economist point of view there, in that sense. It's something taken from the point of view of someone who hasn't even fucking read the book. Why do you think there's no computers there? Why do you think that the computers, or rather, why do you think there's no highly intelligent computers, so to speak, there? I mean, in the fucking book, Paul was given a really tiny book by Ewer. It was a literal book, a tiny fucking book. And you had the fucking, well, for lack of a better word, and to use another franchise's words for it, you had cogitators. Not proper AI, not proper intelligent machines per se, But computers that were able to, say, perform simple functions, you didn't even have something that could make predictions the way that we have here today. That's why you had mentats. That's
And
why you had.
and, and it's why the navigators were so crucial, because with all the advanced computations and everything needed to fold space for intergalactic travel, for the interstellar travel, one of the big points later in the series is the fact that the Ixians have been trying to design a computer that can do the job of a guild navigator.
Which, speaking of that, their fucking video got that wrong too, saying
Yeah.
that navigators fold space time. No, they fucking don't.
Yeah, that is the Holtzman engine. The navigators make it safe, because if you don't, I think the number in the book is something like, if you don't have a navigator, 10% of all spaceflight just never comes back.
Never comes back, and then another percentage comes back, but it's in too close of an orbit to a star or other body and is immediately destroyed.
Yeah. But that is also something that I didn't really think about, because as someone who knows the books so well and really loves them, it's some kind of a preconceived notion that, of course, spice is the spice, and the spice controls the universe and whatever. But do they really actually try to explain in the movie? I can't remember that. Why spice is so important, or do they just say, yeah, here's Arrakis and that's it?
In the new one, no, they don't.
Yeah, I thought I didn't remember that, but
What
yeah.
well, it's done in passing. They're when talking about why this appointment to Arrakis is important, they talk about it actually from initially from the Fremen standpoint. Oh, the Fremen use it for this, and it also allows interstellar travel. It's really thrown in there as oh, by the way, kind of thing, as an afterthought.
But then again, we come back to, if you say the spice is important to the Spacing Guild, but then you don't set up the Spacing Guild, you basically cut off that plot
Yeah.
hook.
Yeah, you're cutting off half of the main plot points of the entire series. At least the first four
And
books.
Yeah, and especially why exactly it is that the Emperor is so fucking. Why he's so desperate, really, to get more spies.
Yeah, and even sets up the later plot that, to the Emperor, that is basically the only thing that can be dangerous to him, is if he pisses off the Spacing Guild. Because they don't have overt power, but they are more powerful than the Emperor. And if they want him gone, they can do it with the snap of a finger. And that's completely not set up here.
That alone is something that you need to understand these dynamics to understand Dune. Because without those dynamics, it's just going to be a movie with names from the characters of Dune. It's not actually going to be Dune. And going back to the Foundation again, the Foundation so far has made a really good story, or has crafted a really good story about the events not even mentioned in the books. They've taken what's been said in the books, they have made the characters actually fit in with what's being mentioned otherwise in the books, and they make it work. Because they do what they have to. They don't do all the other things that they don't really have to, just for the sake of, oh, this will look cool. Even something like Cleon, the whatever the fuck it is in the line, the cloned emperor or emperors. Even those, every one of them, each and every one of them, has their own, well, their own personalities, their own traits, the way that they grew up, the way that they rule, the way that they see things that have happened. Something as just, well, sure, it's a big character in the story, but it's something that's really fucking hard to portray with the way that they work. Every character there has some kind of purpose, be it something that they're an integral part to a colony, or they're part of, say, Trantor, or they're a gardener, or they're a fucking some guy standing in a laundry. All of those characters have some kind of meaning. They have some kind of own agency. When you look at Dune, Paul doesn't really have any kind of meaning as it is. He's a very weird character, just overall. Leto doesn't have any really meaning because it doesn't mean anything as to why they've gone to Arrakis. There's no explanation as to why this is important. Lady Jessica isn't important. She isn't actually set up for what she's meant to be or what she's meant to do. Even the whole thing with why she gave birth to a son rather than a daughter isn't really explained there. No one there is important. You could essentially take the cast there or all the characters there, switch them about, and you wouldn't have any difference. There's just nothing there that's got any substance. None of the characters really fit in. It's like you've taken stock images and then put it in your fucking movie. Like a certain show. Pick up.
No comment.
Well, yeah.
You should have a drink of water there. You sound a little hoarse.
Yeah. I might be beating a dead one too. But it's just something. This movie lacks personality. The people in this movie, the fucking few people there are, lack any agency. It lacks those things that actually make a character a character.
I do like Rodin's bit there that he just posted concerning the guild, and it really is. And with a lot of what they've cut, a lot of the decisions they've made, the larger picture, the larger scale of the entire story that they could have been building up to actually have a movie franchise that would have rivaled Marvel, they're failing at their initial setup. Had they mentioned the guild properly, had they actually done the proper setup with the Bene Gesserit, had they actually laid the groundwork for a lot of these other plots that are going to that carry through the entirety of the books, they could have had this be a much more understandable story for everyone, which then would have kept the story going to where they could have done the entire series in film form. Really like what Peter Jackson did with The Lord of the Rings, how he actually put in the effort to do the initial trilogy of books and do it in a way that was watchable, was enjoyable by both fans and newcomers alike, and it didn't desecrate the source material. And that's what we're getting now, is it is bordering on desecration of the source material with the elements that they have actively decided to leave out. Yeah, there was no mention of Chom. There is no mention
Yeah.
of Chom at all.
Was this barely any mention of the fucking guild at all either?
The guild is mentioned in passing. Chom isn't mentioned at all. The Landsraad is mentioned as some far-off governing body that is...
It's never explained.
In effect, impotent from implication that you get, but... So much potential wasted.
Now, I've brought up this before, and I'm going to just bring it up again. It would have been better had it all just been from the view of Paul and Jessica. So we follow them throughout the whole story. You don't need to set up everything else. You just need to follow them and follow through with what's going on for them the entire movie. That would have been better if executed properly. They could focus just on that. They could focus on actually making those scenes impactful. Like, say, meeting Shadow Mapes and getting that shit done right.
Yeah.
All of those things. Just focus on that. Focus on what you need, not what you want. And they could have made a lot better just story in general. There's enough in the book to actually fill the first half of it just with that.
Yeah, like even if they wanted to, if they were worried about runtime, they really could have established a lot of this shit and then ended the first movie with Paul and Jessica standing on the dune looking out at the vastness before they even run into the Fremen, and end it there. End it on that hanger that, holy shit, this world that we just established that these people were in has just ended. And now they have a new life ahead of them to deal with. That could have worked just as well, but then you probably would have ended up with it being one book being 3 movies instead of 2, which honestly, if that's what you need to get all of the important story details out, I don't see a problem with that.
Yeah. I have heard rumors that Denis Villeneuve wants to make a 3rd movie, but that also sounds a little bit like studio fuckery because Warner Brothers didn't let him film both movies at the same time. So now they basically have to start from the beginning again. Probably for budget reasons or whatever. But yeah, I think it shows that they didn't really plan ahead what they want to do in the first movie and what to do in the second movie. They just filmed whatever, and then in the cutting room decided what was important, what wasn't important, and maybe keep the stuff for later.
Yeah, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall of all of those meetings and heard what decisions were being made and for what reasons. It might actually make more sense why we got the movie that we did.
If we are lucky, maybe we will get 3 movies and then a nice director's cut box like with Lord of the Rings, even if it is 8 hours long or something, where they put everything in and maybe shuffle the order around a little bit and bring it back. But yeah, I'm not too hopeful. We'll see what the other parts actually are.
I'm not hopeful of them doing that, but I would not be opposed to them because so far they're not telling a good story, and it's because of what they've left out. And if they need to increase the runtime to get that material back in to tell the good story, a la the Snyder cut of Justice League,
Yeah,
go for it. Do it. Tell the story the right way. Ooh, yeah. See, Rodent, I'm right there with you. Break up the Dune, break up the one book Your first one, it's a political thriller. And then you have the survival. And then you have the war. It would work. And it would give them the time needed to set everything up and have it actually all come together in the end.
But that also means that they're going to have to, do that kind of stuff without making it all everything fucking grandiose, everything about being great all the fucking time. They're going to have to be talking and actually focus on characters and people.
I mean, shit, the framework's already written for you, you lazy bastards. Read the fucking book!
Yeah, to be honest, I really doubt that a lot of people would complain if they took word for word what's being said in the book and just repeat that. Take it just, not frame by frame, but scene by scene. Take it like that and actually do the scenes right. Show off the fucking feast. Show off the whole meeting with the Emperor. Show off why it's such a big deal for the Atreides to come to Arrakeen or to come to Arrakis, and what it actually means. The plotting behind it. Just everything like that. Do that. Just take it straight from the fucking book.
Yeah, you got the framework there. You got it to work with. Why are you ignoring it? Yes, okay. Okay, my final bit on this, I agree with both Rodin and Dora here. Lord of the Rings proved that there is a market for epic trilogies, but the problem is The Hobbit kind of ruined it right after.
Yeah, because The Hobbit is one movie, or one book, one short book, one simple book.
Yeah. Had they stuck with just The Hobbit and just following Bilbo, one movie and it could have been a good one. But no, they decided that, hey, we did good with a trilogy from the initial books. Let's go ahead and do another trilogy. Oh, wait, you don't have enough source material for it from that book? Here, add from this one too.
Yeah.
But any parting thoughts from Jay or Thierry before we put a pause to the streaming so some people can eat, use the facilities, and then get into the real fun debauchery?
No, not from me, really. I mean, I've always said that I've never read the books, but I've always found the movies interesting. I might actually go buy the books now, just to kind of see what I'm missing out on.
Go and see if you can actually get at a second-hand shop or some shit like that. Get the
That's what a
books from
library's
there.
for.
Yeah,
some
a
shit like-
good library will have them.
Yeah, just mean get the older versions in case there's revisions and shit like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if the print version is prior to 2008, you're good.
Yeah.
What about you?
My parting thought is I still have a bit of hope, even if it is much less than before I saw the movie. And I think it shows that books are still really important and not everything can be substituted by a TV series or a movie. Even if the Foundation or the Expanse show that it can be done, if people do it properly, you always have the option to fall back and just read the book. For example, I will read the original Dune book pretty soon, because at the moment I'm reading all Hugo Award winners in chronological order. And I'm in 1961 now, so Dune will come up pretty soon. And yeah, there are many, many great classics. Read them.
Before it's too late. Speaking of 1984.
We're gonna have another discussion about that later.
Oh,
Or
God.
Fahrenheit 451. That is also in the list of Hugo Award winners.
Yes. What about you, Leon? We've been pretty staunch and vocal about our opinions.
For all the shit that David Lynch's movie gets, I would say it's the superior movie of the two. And I'm pretty much going to leave it at that.
Let's get someone working on a supercut and mix the two, and then we'll probably have a movie worthy of the praise. But until someone's able to do that, I will continue to be critical of and voice my opinions and displeasure as necessary. And with that, we are going to take our short break, and we will be back on air with who knows what kind of debauchery this time, because oh boy, did we find some good things the last couple weeks to kind of read through and talk about. So yeah, stuff and things and stuffy things have been going on. So we will see you all in about 30 minutes.